Welcome to this week's Wheel to Wheel podcast with your hosts, Jack and Danish.
Hey.
And today, we'll just go over some things related to Formula One in terms of, what are our expectations, what are some things we'll be looking for throughout the season. Yeah, we'll jump right into it. Jack, what are some things you want to look at now that testing's over here?
I think for me it's about Hamilton's pace. I mean, how good is he going to be this year? Is he going to be able to win his next championship and make it a beautiful number 7? And to me that's a big part because all through testing, Mercedes have looked quick, but how fast is he really going to be? And is the motivation going to be there for Hamilton? Does he want to catch? I know he wants to catch Michael Schumacher, but how badly?
Right. That's a very good point because I don't know. There were rumors circulating he might even jump to Formula E after. He obviously has some time left.
Yeah.
But then he's kind of kiboshed those rumors, and that'll be kind of interesting to see. I don't know. I think mentally, I don't know if there's anyone out there right now that will give him his one run for his money kind of thing. You know what I mean?
I think the closest would be his teammate Valtteri Bottas, and we'll see how it works out. But to me, it's curious to see how Hamilton has progressed and evolved from the driver he was to the driver he is today, and see if he can really achieve. I mean, he's already a legend, but one more notch on his belt, kind of thing. But I'm really curious to see how he evolves and gets there. And I guess also talking about Bottas, it's driver development. I'm curious to see how some of these other drivers change as well. You got a lot of young drivers in Leclerc, Verstappen, Albon, Norris. That's just to name a few. There's the grid is very young, I feel like, and I'm curious to see who takes the next step forward.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, just to the fact that I don't think there has been a time where we've recently seen at least this many young drivers on the grid.
Yeah.
A lot of inexperience, but I think that can also be a good thing. You have some veteran drivers, but the inexperience obviously leads to, in my opinion, I think a lot more exciting in terms of the battles and stuff that happen on track.
Yeah.
But the maturity then grows together. And I think we had talked about this earlier as well. We hadn't seen this many people that, started out in karting as well, growing up. Yeah. And now, they're now with different teams, but they all came in relatively at the same time.
Yeah.
Like Leclerc and Albon and Gasly. And so that'll be really cool to see as well in terms of that growth. But
to me, it's always easy to show up for the first year because you're excited. It's the second and third year kind of when you start to get used to things and you take things a little bit for granted. So, and as a young person, I think it's important to remember where you came from. And I'm curious to see which of these drivers can continue on that trajectory. Mm-hmm. Sometimes when you show up, you have a lot of momentum, but after that, you just get used to it, or don't work as hard, or don't get as excited to get up and race. But I mean, we're in Formula One at the highest level, so it should be easy for them to get up there. So absolutely. I'm curious to see how it goes. I'm really excited to see 2 Canadian drivers too. I don't think we talk enough about it.
Right.
To see Lance Stroll and Latifi out there for Williams. So I'm excited to see that. I hope that really spurs on some fandom in Canada and some supporting, and so that we can talk more about motorsports in Canada.
Right. And we usually have great crowds, I think, down east as well, in terms of the fan following. But hopefully this, progress, and hopefully they do well enough that, some of that passion and love spreads throughout the rest of Canada. I think you're absolutely spot on. It should be a more of a nationalist kind of approach in this sense that we have 2 drivers on the road.
It's a matter of pride. I think Britain's really proud of all their British drivers. We tend to be not so much engaged with motorsports, but this gives us a real opportunity to expand into that.
Absolutely.
I guess one of the cool things we've been seeing with documentaries like Drive to Survive is team rivalries. I think that's going to come into play really quickly between teams like Ferrari, Renault, guys who have, and even Mercedes for that fact, with Bottas and Hamilton fighting to be at the front and try to win the championship. So I'm curious to see if guys like Leclerc can bring the fight consistently to Vettel, which we saw a little bit of. I just wonder if he can find another gear there. And in Red Bull, I'm curious to see what Albon does. I think he came up for a 9-race cup of tea and did just fine.
Right.
So how quick is he? I don't really know. I mean, he's shown some great promise, but can he really close the gap to Verstappen? And what is Verstappen? Mm-hmm. Wow, like one of the best talents on the grid. Right. How far can he really go as well? So I'm really curious to see how these team battles shake out. Not to mention there's a lot of other teams out there like Force India, Williams as well, 2 young drivers trying to prove themselves. I think it creates for a lot of tension and a lot of pressure on the race weekends.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess my last thing I'm looking forward to would be Renault. I'm a little confused. They're a big budget team. Daniel Ricciardo went over there and didn't really get the results he wanted last year. They've been on record saying maybe they didn't develop the car they wanted to. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious to see how they do this year. They're a manufacturer, a big budget team. They really can be that 4th team on the grid, but they kind of lost that to McLaren last year, and I'm curious to see what that means, because regulations are changing next year. I wonder what that means for the sport. I wonder what that means for their team. So I'm curious to see how they perform. Not really a team that gets a lot of talk on this side of the pond, mm-hmm. but something to keep an eye on for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they might have to take a little bit of a step backwards, from their great 2018 season. Yeah. Obviously, take some items. It's never usually a fun thing to go backwards in terms of your development. And so it would be interesting to see in terms of how they develop in terms of in-season as well, in terms of the developments that they bring to each race, and how the 2 drivers interact as well. Obviously, you got Esteban Ocon coming in now. Hulkenberg no longer there, which I think is a real shame. But Ocon coming in, different teammate chemistry, of course.
Yeah.
He'll obviously be hungrier than ever to prove his worth as well. And so hopefully that gives the team, obviously, they're highly motivated to prove their worth as a works team. And so, that'll be something for sure to keep an eye out for.
Yeah. So what are the things you're looking forward to, Danish?
Yeah, and so for me, looking at testing here the past couple weeks, my number one question is start with Ferrari, and are they bluffing? Are they really holding something back that we don't know? Obviously, testing is something that's not really indicative of, as soon as the race starts in Melbourne, that's when we really can tell performance-wise what they're really capable of doing. But there's just a little concern there in terms of they logged a lot of laps. Mm-hmm. I think they logged about a total of about 860 laps total. They're only one of 3 teams that were above the 800 marker there. And so they logged a lot of laps, obviously a little bit behind Mercedes, but their pace wasn't necessarily the greatest. This time last year, they were a lot quicker. And so that's a little bit of a concern for me. So definitely want to watch for the first couple of races there and see how Ferrari progress in terms of their development. Yeah. And as you mentioned as well, the driver chemistry as well between Leclerc and Vettel. And can Leclerc really establish himself as that number 1 option in the championship? We'll wait to see. Only time will tell. But that's definitely my first point here.
Yeah, it won't be the first team that bluffs in practice, or testing, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and as you guys would basically mention, king of I think practices and stuff. You win the practice world championship, but not the real one. But that's definitely my first point of concern here in terms of what I'd be watching for. The DAS system, which you guys are probably familiar with if you guys obviously are following Formula 1 as well. It's a new system that's come out. It's never seen before.
Yeah, quite a surprise.
It has been, in terms of, it really blew my mind when I first saw it in action there in testing, and Mercedes absolutely doing a great job knocking it out of the park in terms of constant innovation and never really settling for their dominance that they've currently had in this V6 turbo hybrid era. For those of you that don't know, essentially, what the DAS system is, it's related to the front tires. So usually you have camber that is on the front tires of a Formula 1 car, which cause the front tires to lean in a bit. So if you can visually see it, it basically causes the tire angle to lean in. And what that does, it helps with turning and cornering ability. So when you turn, obviously, more force is being pushed to the outer side of your car. And so it really helps with the full displacement of the tire during a corner. And then on the straight, because you have a narrower contact patch, you tend to get a little bit less drag out of your front tires as well, which allows you to go a little bit quicker in a straight line. And so what Mercedes have cleverly done here is they've allowed basically their steering. So again, this is a fine line within the regulations, which basically mention that you're not really allowed to have anything on your steering wheel to tweak that will allow any changes to those front wheel angles or suspension related angles during a run. What Mercedes have done here cleverly is they have taken the steering wheel movement, and so by moving it forward and backwards like in an airplane as a control column, they can change or alter the pitch angle of the wheel. And so that's never been seen before, obviously. But what that does is it provides, if their tires tend to overheat at a certain level, or if they're not getting enough heat, they can change or adjust on a straight line, by pulling back on the column, allowing the tires to sit relatively more flush so you don't get as much blistering on the inner tire. And then let go, and the tires go back to its pre-positioned angle, so that when you go into a turn, now you still have the same camber level as you would have before. So again, that's a system that I think is really exciting. They banned it for next year. I don't know why they didn't do it for this year, but
yeah, it's apparently legal. So
apparently, yeah. And so that will be a close eye for us as well in terms of taking a look at it.
Yeah.
Who knows? It might backfire as well. In certain weather conditions. I don't know if rain hits or because obviously conditions change, and so it'll be an interesting point to see as well. Moving on into some of the team aspects here. For me, Williams definitely is a team to keep an eye on. Obviously, they had a very rough 2018 and 2019 season.
Yeah, horrible.
And it's a real shocking, basically, turnaround for, I think, a team, not just in motorsports, but, you'd have to even compare it to other sports just to see how dismal of a fall that was. I think it was just in 2017 here where they just finished 5th in the championship, and to fall that far off the table... It's really concerning for a legendary team like Williams. Yeah,
agreed. It's hard to watch, such a team with so much heritage, but it also goes to show you how much work it is to stay competitive in Formula One.
Absolutely.
A few wrong steps and you find yourself tumbling, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, again, in testing, it's not 100% indicative, but based on the times that they were able to do, and they logged plenty of laps as well, which is great to see. They were right up there in the midfield, with Haas. Not as much Renault, but, Haas, Racing Point, and a few other teams there. So great to see. Hopefully they can start off strong and then keep that momentum going. The same momentum can be said for Haas as well, another team that I would be looking forward to. Obviously, based on even the Drive to Survive series that you guys might have watched, or even the recent news, they might pull out. They might, if things aren't going well for next year, and which would be a real shame, just because they do have, I think, a great package. Drivers not always the best, but Grosjean, okay, fine, we all give him heck for it. But I think even their drivers are still capable of bringing home regular points. And so if they just get a footing underneath them, they got Ferrari power unit. Obviously, and they got some good stuff from Ferrari as well. But everything else, they have a third-party company that builds their chassis, Dallara, in the States, and so they have the pieces there to consistently earn points. We've seen it. It's been done. So can they, again, keep the momentum up and show that, they belong on that Formula One grid? Only time will tell.
Yeah, they kind of took a different approach when they came into Formula One. They didn't want to develop everything. They started buying stuff and assembling things, and they had massive amount of success right off the bat, and they had, or at least relatively, for being a young team. And it's kind of hard to watch them kind of fall backwards. Maybe that same sort of model doesn't bode well with development. Maybe it's good for getting started, but not really for development. So it's an interesting approach.
Absolutely. And they definitely entered the sport a lot more efficiently and effectively, as you mentioned.
Right.
Cost basis. We keep coming back to cost because it does play such an important role.
Yeah.
Hopefully not so much in later years as in the future. If we get cost measures in place. to help newer teams especially establish themselves a little bit more competitively. But they, as you mentioned, they went out of the box and they didn't build everything in-house. So that definitely helped save cost and time to be more competitive.
Agreed. Yeah.
But it does limit, of course, it has its downsides in terms of what you really can do to really be a front challenger.
Yeah.
And so, it'll be an interesting team to look at. And then my last, basically, keys to look at here for the season is the new tracks that are being introduced. Zandvoort, obviously the Dutch Grand Prix that will be coming up, a huge Verstappen Tifosi going to be on hand. And then the Vietnamese Grand Prix.
Yeah.
And so both tracks are relatively unique. Vietnam is a bit of a street circuit.
Okay.
And so it's not an established circuit at all. And, with street circuits, things get chaotic and crazy.
Yeah.
At any street circuits, you look at Baku last few years, just been bonkers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, surface is good, obviously. I was able to look at a preliminary, image of the track. And it's very cool to see, actually. It's based a lot of it in terms of wide streets, and wide sections of the track. And so I think there's a decent amount of overtaking opportunities as well, more so than the Zandvoort track, of course. But if you guys haven't taken a look, make sure, just Google in, the Zandvoort track and the Vietnam track, and you guys can definitely have a comparison side by side. We'll have it as well here for you. But it's not... there are two very different tracks. The Zandvoort track has a few corners that have... two corners, I believe, that have some banking in it as well.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting element. I'm for those that don't know, I've been a proponent of having more banked corners, like on road courses. Partly because I think it gives different lines, depending on how tight the turn is, of course. Right. But it allows for more flexibility in terms of choosing different lines. So because usually if your cars are set up a certain way, it has a different effect on your tires.
Yeah.
And so by giving multiple lines, I think, it'll allow for more selection in that process.
Yeah, it'd be more entertaining. Harder for the drivers to predict what to do. There's a lot more strategy behind it.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to say as well is if it rains, because the thing with banked corners they're not good for handling water that goes down.
No, they're not.
That will be very interesting to see how cars handle. Pirelli already mentioned, I think, earlier this week that they're not going to bring any different tires. Like if you can all remember the Michelin debacle for the Indianapolis Grand Prix, the U.S. Grand Prix back in 2005. Michelin brought tires that unfortunately weren't as durable in that sense. And I hate to say that because I really love Michelin as a tire company.
Yeah.
But, they had multiple tire failures in that turn 13 banked corner. And so Pirelli decided, we're not going to, we don't need any different tire specifications. So it'll be interesting to watch how the race folds. A very smooth circuit. Obviously freshly renovated. Not a high amount of overtaking opportunities.
Interesting.
It's very, and it doesn't really, it's not a forgiving track. And so if you do put a tire wrong, you will end up in the gravel trap, which I love about it.
Yeah, I can already see the headlines, Verstappen parks it on pole and then drives away and nobody can pass him. Right. So I'm sure that's what they want.
Until the last corner and into the barrier, into the traps. I think it'll be a great season here coming up.
Yep.
I think there's a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, I just want to mention a couple more things that are kind of popped into my head just listening to you. I think the big one is going to be to watch for the virus that's happening and the impact of that on Formula One. I'm curious to see how widespread that is. I know there's the Chinese Grand Prix that's been postponed, and there's some talk of Imola maybe getting in there on the calendar. I'm curious to see how that shakes out. And I think the last one, I can't leave this episode without talking about this, is Racing Point following very similar footsteps of Haas, buying a very fast car, some sort of technology from Mercedes so that they can copy their car, and they look like a pink Mercedes car, which is going to be mighty quick. In fact, so quick that it might change the way Formula One is run. Maybe everybody just develops one fast car and everyone buys it, and you all run a series, right? It'll be very interesting to see. And so I feel like Formula One's going through a little bit of a change, and we saw it with Haas doing it, and so now I'm curious to see how it works out with the Racing Point team. I mean, they've been mighty quick in testing, so
They have, yeah, and with Renault, of course, having their goals being set as being trying to be again back to fourth in the constructors' championship, they definitely have the work cut out for them. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think it would be effective in terms of the cost wise, but again, it would be a little bit of a shame if we were to take some of that technology and that development away by just buying existing pieces.
Yeah,
you kind of have to.
Yeah,
obviously at this point in time.
Yeah,
but hopefully they can just Ideally, I would like to see a structure where you'd have a cost cap in place, but it allows you the freedom to allocate, let's say you divide it into 3 parts, like a power unit side, a chassis side, a mechanical side. And basically you have, each team has a certain amount that's allocated to it. And however you want to spend it, you go ahead and spend it. But once you hit that max, whatever that max is, you're done.
Right.
And it also might change in terms of in-season testing.
Yeah.
So let's say right now you can spend an unlimited amount to develop in-season. Well, let's say you have a 300 million cap for the entire season. That includes in-season testing.
Right.
Well, now you have to be a little careful now, right? And so it gets people thinking a lot more.
Yeah. I'm curious to see. But either way, we're looking forward to this season.
Absolutely.
It's gonna be a tight one in Albert Park in Australia, and we look forward to it.
Absolutely, and we'd love to hear from you guys as well. Any of your thoughts or opinions, and we'll definitely go from there. Hit the ground running. Thanks for listening to us.
Thanks, guys.